The first time I saw her scar, the firelight caught it like glass. An uneven streak of pale silver slashing diagonally across her chest, glowing faintly under the cracked plating of her armor. I hadn't meant to look, and I certainly hadn't meant to reach for it. But there was something about that mark, something alive beneath it, that drew my hand before my mind could stop me. Her skin was cool, smooth, and alive with an energy that seemed to hum through my fingertips. I expected her to pull away, to strike me for such a bold act, but she didn't. She just stood there, unblinking, her eyes following the movement of my hand as though testing my courage. "You shouldn't touch what you don't understand," she said at last, her voice quiet, low, and edged with something that wasn't quite threat. "I've spent my life touching things I don't understand," I replied before I could stop myself. Her lips twitched, the faintest ghost of a smile, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Humans," she murmured, "always reaching for the wound." Her name was Sereth, warrior of the Varen Guard, last heir of the Wormsteel bloodline, and, at least according to her people, cursed by the gods she no longer believed in. We met in the ruins of a city that had once stood as the capital of her world. Now nothing but bones and dust under a broken moon. My team was gone, killed or captured during the collapse of the last Terran outpost, and I had been wandering through the debris when I found her, or maybe when she found me. For the first 2 days, she refused to speak. She moved with silent precision, her red braids bound in tight coils that shimmered faintly when she turned her head. Every motion spoke of discipline, purpose, restraint. When she finally spoke, it was only to ask me why I was still alive. I told her the truth. I didn't know. That earned me the smallest glimmer of respect or pity. I still can't tell which. Now, sitting across from her in the half-collapsed temple where she'd made camp, I saw her differently. The fire cast lines of gold along her face, softening the edges of what had once terrified me. The scar caught the light again, and I couldn't look away. She noticed, of course. Sereth noticed everything. "It burns still," she said, "even when I forget it's there." "What happened?" I asked. She looked into the fire as if she were watching a memory instead of flames. "Do you know what happens when your gods betray you?" she said finally. I shook my head. "They leave a mark," she whispered. Her gaze lifted, meeting mine with a stillness that made the air feel heavy. "You think it's just a wound," she said. "But it's not. It's a language." "A language?" "Yes," she said softly. "The gods write their curses in flesh." I tried to speak, but she reached out, pressing my hand firmly against her chest again, over the scar. The pulse beneath it was slow but powerful, like a second heart beating beneath the first. "Feel it," she said. "It hums because it remembers." The pain was supposed to make me kneel. Instead, it made me see. Her voice changed, quieter, like a confession. "They wanted to erase us. They failed." She withdrew her hand, and I realized mine was still resting against her skin. When I pulled it back, my palm glowed faintly, a soft trace of light fading into my veins before disappearing. I looked at her in shock. "What did you just share?" she interrupted. "A memory. Only a sliver. You touched my scar. Now it remembers you too." I didn't know what she meant until I blinked, and the fire vanished. Suddenly I was standing on a battlefield that wasn't mine. The sky was crimson and black, the ground littered with broken bodies that burned without smoke. Armored giants strode across the horizon, their weapons made of light. And at the center of it all, Sereth stood alone, her armor shattered, her body glowing from within as though she were burning from the inside out. I saw her raise her blade, heard her cry out, not in fear, but in defiance, and the light exploded. Then, as quickly as it came, the vision was gone. I was back in the temple, gasping for breath. She was watching me closely. "That's what happened," she said softly. "That's what your kind came too late to see." My voice was hoarse. You fought gods?" "No," she said. "I fought their idea of one." The fire crackled between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "The war ended because I ended it. But no one ever tells the story that way. Then tell it, I said. She gave a humorless laugh. You wouldn't believe it. Try me. She studied me for a long time, then nodded slightly. Fine, she said. You touched my scar, human. Now you carry a piece of its truth. You deserve to know the rest. She leaned back, her eyes distant, her voice low and steady. It began on the day we lost the sky. The sky she spoke of was not the one I knew. In her world, the sky had once been alive, a living thing of heat and motion, a constant shimmering river that breathed above them like a god's pulse. We thought it was eternal, Sarah said, her voice low, her gaze fixed on the flames as they bent toward her, as though the fire itself remembered what she described. Until the day it fell. I listened, trying to imagine a world where the very air burned. The sky fell, I asked. It didn't fall, she said quietly. It was taken. Her fingers traced the edge of her scar as if following an invisible map. Our gods built it to feed on our faith. The more we believed, the brighter it burned. But faith is a fire that consumes. Her words hung in the air, heavy with memory. When we began to question, when we asked why the flames demanded sacrifice, the sky began to fade. That was when they came. Her eyes met mine, and I could see the flicker of reflected light dancing within them like trapped stars. The seraphim, she said, the true architects of our worship. They were not gods. They were the keepers of a machine that devoured souls and turned belief into energy. I felt a chill crawl through me. You fought them. No, she said, her voice hard. We obeyed them, until I didn't. She turned her gaze to me again, something ancient stirring behind her calm exterior. The scar, she said softly, is what they gave me when I refused. The firelight deepened the shadows across her face, and for a moment I saw not the warrior, but the girl she must have been, young, defiant, standing before something vast and cruel. They called it purification, she said. They branded me with divine light. It was meant to silence the part of me that still thought for itself. But it didn't work. Instead, it woke something older. Older? I asked, almost afraid to breathe. The blood remembers, she said simply. Before gods, before machines, before the dominion. She closed her eyes, and I saw the faint veins of blue energy pulse beneath her skin, like lightning beneath ice. When they tried to erase me, they gave me back everything they'd stolen. She looked up at me then, and her expression shifted. Half sorrow, half pride. I became their heresy. The fire crackled, and outside, the wind moaned through the ruins like a dying chorus. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was dry. I had seen death, but never something like her. A survivor who had burned and come back with light in her blood. And now, I asked finally, what happens to you now? Her smile was faint, almost human. I wander, she said. I find what the seraphim left behind. Their temples, their machines, and I break them. Her tone was simple, matter-of-fact, like someone describing a daily ritual rather than vengeance. Does it help? I asked. She shrugged slightly. It reminds me that I'm still alive. There was silence for a long time, and then quietly, I asked, why tell me this? Her eyes softened, though her voice stayed firm. Because you touched the scar, she said, and now you carry its song. I frowned. Its song. It hums inside you, she said. The scar connects us, even now. That's how the seraphim tracked us. They used the resonance of pain as a beacon. But now, her gaze darkened. Now they will know you too. The weight of her words hit me like cold metal. You're saying they'll come for me? Not yet, she said. But they will. They never let their creation slip away. She stood then, her movements deliberate, her armor whispering softly. When they come, you'll feel it first. A pull like the gravity of memory. When that happens, run. Run where? Anywhere, she said. It won't save you, but it will buy time. I rose too, my pulse quickening. You're talking like this is inevitable. It is, she said quietly. But you won't face it alone. She turned toward the broken archway that led out into the night. The air outside shimmered faintly, disturbed by invisible energy. "They can smell faith," she whispered. "Even the kind you don't believe you have." We left the ruins at dawn. The horizon was a wound of gold and ash, the twin suns half buried in cloud. As we walked, the ground crunched beneath our boots. Shards of old glass fused with sand, relics of a war so ancient the earth itself had forgotten how to heal. Sereth moved ahead, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her blade. I noticed how the light seemed to bend around her, drawn to her presence like moths to flame. "How many of them are left?" I asked. "The seraphim?" she said. "Too many." "And your people?" She hesitated before answering. "Less than 1,000 scattered across the moons. The rest became something else. Empty shells. Worshippers with no gods left to feed." Her voice cracked just slightly, and I realized then that for all her strength, the weight of survival was its own kind of wound. By midday, the ruins gave way to a vast plain of glassy black stone. Heat shimmered on the horizon, and strange structures jutted from the ground, spires of twisted metal that hummed faintly when the wind touched them. Sereth slowed, her eyes narrowing. "A relay," she said. "They're listening." I drew my sidearm instinctively, but she shook her head. "It's useless. These are not machines of your making. They don't break. They remember." She knelt beside one of the spires, placing her hand against it. A faint light pulsed through its veins, and for a moment, I thought I heard whispers, thousands of voices, layered over one another, crying, pleading, praising. I stumbled back. "What is that?" She rose slowly. "The prayers of the dead," she said, "trapped in metal. The seraphim used them as anchors to sustain their power. This is how they fed the sky." I stared at the spire, my stomach turning. "Can we shut it down?" She glanced at me, the faintest spark of admiration in her gaze. "You really think like a soldier," she said. "Yes, we can shut it down. But it will hurt." She reached for my hand again, her fingers steady, warm despite the chill. "You can see it now. The scar opened your senses. You'll feel it when I do this." "Feel what?" "The ending." Her eyes closed, and a low hum filled the air. The spire began to tremble, its glow flickering from gold to red to white. I felt the vibration crawl through my bones, through my blood, until it reached the place her scar had touched. Then came the pain, sharp, searing, alive. It wasn't physical. It was memory, grief, rage, loss. All the suffering that had been poured into the metal now flooding through me. I fell to my knees, gasping. "Stop!" I shouted, but she didn't. Her face was serene, her eyes glowing like twin suns. "Pain remembers," she said, "but so does hope." With one last cry, she drove her hand into the spire's core. Light burst outward, blinding and pure, tearing across the plain. When I opened my eyes, the spires were gone, reduced to ash. The wind was silent again. Sereth was kneeling beside me, her breath shallow, her scar burning bright. I reached for her, my hand trembling. "You're bleeding," I said. She smiled faintly. "It's not blood. It's memory leaving. You didn't have to." "I did," she said firmly. "Every beacon destroyed weakens them. Every scar shared makes us stronger." She looked at me then, truly looked, and for the first time there was no barrier between us, no warrior and human, no alien and stranger. Just two people carrying each other's ghosts. "You see now," she said softly. "You understand why it had to be done." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I understand. But if they're coming for us, then we'd better be ready." Her lips curved slightly. "Then let's make them remember what it feels like to bleed." The horizon burned crimson as the day faded, and somewhere beyond the veil of dusk, the seraphim stirred in their long slumber. I felt the scar hum faintly in my chest, its rhythm matching hers. Whatever war had been waiting, it had just found new witnesses, and this time, the gods would not be the only ones writing in flesh. The storm began that night, not of weather but of light. It started as a low pulse beneath the ground, a vibration that made the earth feel alive again, though not in any way that comforted. The seraphim had felt the loss of their relay. They were stirring, stretching through the void like a mind waking from a centuries-long dream. Sereth stood at the ridge overlooking the plains, her armor faintly lit by the glow of her scar. Her gaze fixed on the horizon where flickers of unnatural lightning twisted across the darkening sky. "They know," she said. "They're angry." I joined her, clutching the rifle that now felt like a child's toy in the face of what we'd seen. "How long until they reach us?" She closed her eyes, listening to something I couldn't hear. "They're already here." The air rippled, bending light into spirals, and from the distortion emerged shapes, towering, fluid, neither flesh nor machine but something in between. They moved like liquid metal, their forms shifting between elegance and horror. Each step they took left the air shimmering with a residue of gold and ash. The seraphim were not creatures one could fight. They were ideas given form. And they were beautiful in the way fire is beautiful, impossible to touch without being consumed. Sereth drew her weapon, the blade humming softly with energy that resonated with the pulse of her scar. "Stay behind me," she said. I wanted to argue, but one look at her expression, calm, resigned, radiant, made it clear that she didn't expect to survive this. The first seraphim approached, its face a shifting mask of light, its voice a chorus. "You cannot silence faith, daughter of the flame." The sound cut through me like cold steel. Seretha's reply was quiet but firm. "Faith was never yours to own." Then she moved. I'd seen warriors fight before, but not like her. She flowed rather than struck, every motion guided by instinct older than thought, her blade leaving arcs of blue fire in its wake. When it met the seraphim's form, light erupted, scattering shards of energy that burned through the ground like molten stars. For a moment, she held her own, but there were too many. The others encircled her, their voices merging into a single, deafening tone that made the stones around us crack. "Sereth!" I shouted, raising my weapon, though I knew it was useless. Still, I fired, the plasma bolts vanishing into their bodies as if swallowed by water. One of the seraphim turned toward me, its formless hand reaching out. I felt the air rip from my lungs, my vision blurring. The world seemed to tilt, and then suddenly the pressure stopped. Sereth was between us, her palm pressed against the creature's chest, her scar blazing white-hot. The light spread from her hand into the seraphim, searing through its body like a fracture through glass. It screamed, not in pain, but in revelation. The other seraphim recoiled, their forms flickering, their glow dimming. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "Showing them," she said, her voice trembling. "Showing them what freedom feels like." The light grew unbearable, the ground beneath us splitting open, the air vibrating with power. When it ended, everything was silent. The seraphim were gone. No corpses, no remains, just the faint shimmer of golden dust falling through the air like snow. Sereth fell to her knees, her armor scorched, her breathing ragged. I ran to her, catching her before she collapsed completely. "It's over," I said. She shook her head weakly. "No," she whispered. "It's beginning." Her eyes met mine, the fire within them flickering faintly. "They weren't destroyed, Kale. They were changed. You felt it too. And I had. Something inside me, some small, unseen current, was humming, a faint vibration that felt like the echo of her scar. "What did you do to me?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "I gave you their light. We hid that night in the hollow of an ancient tree, the air thick with the scent of ozone and ash. She slept, or tried to, but I could see the pain in her breathing, the strain of holding herself together after what she'd unleashed. I watched her scar fade and pulse, its light dimming and brightening like the rhythm of a dying star. "You said the seraphim feed on faith," I said quietly. "Then what happens if faith turns against them?" Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, I thought I saw pride. "Then they starve," she said. "And when gods starve, they become mortal." The implication hung heavy between us. "You made them mortal?" "Not all," she whispered. "But enough." She turned her gaze to me, her voice almost gentle. They'll come for you now. You carry their essence, their hunger. You're proof they can be undone. I wanted to tell her that I didn't ask for this, that I wasn't ready to bear something cosmic and terrible. But the truth was, she already knew. She reached out, her fingers brushing my wrist where the faint trace of light pulsed beneath my skin. You're afraid, she said softly. Good. Fear keeps you human. The following days blurred together into a series of long marches and sleepless nights. We crossed shattered valleys where rivers of metal ran like mercury, climbed ruins that hummed with faint electricity, and watched stars bleed across the black horizon as if mourning the loss of their own light. Along the way, Sareth taught me to listen, to feel the vibrations beneath the earth, the resonance of what she called the echo. Everything that lives leaves a sound behind, she explained. Even silence. She taught me how to weave that sound into movement, how to steady my mind when the whispers of the seraphim tried to claw their way back into it. Slowly, I began to hear what she heard. Faint harmonies beneath the stillness, the pulse of the universe remembering itself. Sometimes I caught her watching me, her expression unreadable, as though she saw in me something she didn't expect, a reflection she hadn't asked for. You're learning too fast, she said one night. Humans aren't built for this. You said the same about yourself, I reminded her. And you're still standing. She gave a small, tired smile. Barely. On the 7th night, we reached the edge of what had once been a sea. It was dry now. The sand fused into glass, stretching to the horizon like a mirror. In the distance stood a structure that glowed faintly, half buried but unmistakably alive. Sareth stopped, her hand tightening on the hilt of her blade. The last gate, she said. The heart of the seraphim. I stared at it, my throat tight. You mean the source? No, she said. The memory. The place where they first decided to become gods. Her eyes darkened. This is where they wrote the first scar. She looked at me then, something like sorrow flickering across her face. And this is where I end. I shook my head. No, not again. It has to be me, she said. You carry their light now. If I destroy the gate, you'll inherit what's left. What does that mean? It means you'll live, and I won't. The simplicity of her words broke something in me. There has to be another way. She stepped closer, pressing her hand against my chest, right over the faintly glowing mark beneath my skin. There never was, she whispered. You carry the scar now. You carry me. I didn't realize I was crying until she leaned in and rested her forehead against mine. Her skin was cool, her breath steady. You told me once that humans spend their lives touching what they don't understand, she said. Now you do. Sareth, I began, but she silenced me with a single word. Remember. Then she turned toward the gate, her body wreathed in light that pulsed brighter with every step. The ground trembled, the air screamed, and the gate began to open, spilling radiance so fierce it carved shadows into the stone. She looked back once, her smile faint but fearless. Don't waste what we suffered for, she said. Then she plunged her blade into the heart of the light. The explosion tore the sky apart. The blast tore through the glass planes like a supernova unchained, folding the horizon into light. For a moment, there was no sound, no heat, just a perfect and terrible brightness that swallowed everything, even thought. Then the shockwave came, a wall of pressure that threw me backward through the air. I hit the ground hard, my body rolling across shards of molten sand, every nerve screaming. When I opened my eyes, the world was aflame, but not with fire. It was burning with memory. The gate of the seraphim was collapsing inward, its once perfect geometry folding into itself like a dying star. At its center stood Sareth, her body a silhouette carved against the brilliance. Her armor was gone, her red braids whipping like threads of light. She looked infinite and small all at once, a mortal shape containing something vast. Sareth! I tried to move, but my limbs felt like they'd turned to stone. Her voice reached me, not through the air, but through the pulse that linked us. Stay where you are, Kale. The gate must close from within. You'll die, I shouted. Then I die, She answered, her tone calm, resolute. That's what it means to bear the first scar. The ground split open beneath her as the gate screamed, a sound older than creation, and from its wound rose the seraphim, no longer golden, no longer perfect. They were broken, their forms flickering between flesh and light, their voices fractured into discord. Daughter, they cried, their tones unraveling. You cannot unmake what was divine. Divinity is just power without consequence, she said, her voice like thunder. And I am consequence. Then she raised her hand, and for the first time, I saw her truly wield what had been done to her. The scar across her chest blazed open, spilling tendrils of silver fire that reached for the heavens. The seraphim shrieked as the light touched them, their perfect symmetry crumbling into chaos. The air shimmered as the gate began to consume itself, collapsing the god machine that had ruled her world for millennia. I crawled toward her, my vision a blur of smoke and brilliance. You can't do this alone, I shouted, but her response was almost a whisper. I never was alone, and then I felt it. The pulse inside me, the echo of her scar, beating in rhythm with hers. The connection flared, and for an instant our minds were one. I saw through her eyes, the endless expanse of stars, the faces of her fallen kin, the fire of rebellion that refused to die. She saw through mine, Earth's endless oceans, the fragile beauty of a sunrise over a city scarred by its own wars, and the small, stubborn hope that had kept me alive long after reason failed. You see? She whispered through the link. We are the same. Then her light poured into me. The shock of it sent me to my knees. The heat didn't burn, it enlightened. I could feel her essence, her memories, her grief and triumph, flooding through me like a river finding its course. Every moment she had lived, every battle, every loss, every flicker of defiance. All of it became mine. I screamed, not from pain, but from the unbearable magnitude of it. The gate exploded into fragments of white flame that scattered across the sky like dying stars. When the light faded, the plains were silent again. The gate was gone. The seraphim were gone. And Sereth was nowhere to be seen. I stumbled forward, my heart pounding, calling her name into the wind. Sereth! My voice echoed across the glass, unanswered. Where she had stood, only a single mark remained. A faint, glowing spiral burned into the ground. I sank to my knees before it, my breath shaking. You said I'd carry you, I whispered. Then don't make me do it alone. The mark pulsed faintly beneath my palm. A whisper brushed the edge of my mind. You're not alone. It was her voice. Faint, far, but unmistakable. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the scar beneath my skin burn softly in reply. The pulse matched the rhythm of her voice. The light is yours now, she said. But remember what I told you. The gods feed on what we surrender. Never kneel, Kale. Not to them. Not to memory. Not even to me. The connection faded, leaving me with the echo of her laughter. Soft. Almost human. I stayed there for what felt like hours, maybe days, until the sun set and rose again, painting the ruins in hues of red and silver. The scar on my chest no longer glowed constantly. It slept, like a heartbeat waiting to be woken. I knew then that she wasn't gone. She was diffused, woven into the very light that now touched every stone, every breath of wind. The gate's destruction hadn't ended her. It had freed her. When I finally found the strength to move, I began walking. There was no direction, no plan, only purpose. I carried her blade, now cold and dull, strapped to my back. I didn't know where I was heading, only that I had to move, to carry the story forward. Days blurred into weeks. I crossed deserts of glass, cities of ash, and forests made of living metal. Everywhere I went, the same thing happened. The scar on my chest would glow faintly, and the land would begin to heal. The air would clear, the soil would soften, and strange new flowers, blue like her skin, would bloom. The people I met, survivors scattered across the wasteland, began to follow me. They called me the bearer, the echo, the scar walker. I didn't correct them. I wasn't their savior. I was their reminder. Months later, I reached the mountain where the First War had begun, a place the old maps called Vera's Spine. At its summit lay an ancient observatory, half collapsed but still standing. Inside, I found what remained of the old world. Records, star charts, fragments of glass tablets etched with the languages of the dead. I lit a fire there and stayed for a long time. Every night, I would write what I remembered of her. The way she spoke to fire like it was an old friend. The way she laughed only when she forgot who was listening. The way her eyes softened when she saw the sky for the last time. I wrote because memory is rebellion against oblivion. And though I knew the seraphim might return someday, I also knew that their perfection would fail again, for perfection cannot survive in a universe that remembers how to heal. It was on the 100th night that the sky changed. The stars brightened, their light converging into a single thread that stretched from horizon to horizon. Pulsed faintly at first, then stronger. I felt the scar in my chest respond, its warmth spreading through my veins. The air shimmered, and from the light, a shape began to form. Not a body, not a ghost, but an imprint, feminine, graceful, made entirely of starlight. She looked at me, and I knew. "Sereth," I whispered. The apparition smiled. "You kept walking," she said. "I promised," I replied. "And now you'll keep teaching." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "You were the teacher." "We both were," she said. Her light flickered, as though moved by an unseen wind. "The seraphim will rise again, Kale. Nothing that ancient dies forever. But they will not find the same world they left. They will find one that remembers how to defy. Then we'll be ready," I said. She smiled again, softer this time. "We already are." Then she was gone, her light scattering into the night, dissolving into the stars until the sky itself seemed to glow with her memory. When dawn came, the horizon blazed gold, and for the first time since the war, the suns rose without fire or smoke. I sat beside the fire, her blade across my knees, the scar warm beneath my hand. "We remember," I said quietly. "We still remember." The wind carried the words into the valley below, where survivors were beginning to rebuild. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of sight, a faint pulse answered. It was her watching, waiting, alive in the only way that mattered. Years later, when the war was nothing more than legend and the glass plains had turned to fields of crystal grass that swayed beneath twin suns, I found myself standing before a monument that bore no name. It was built from the shards of the gate, fused together into a spiral that reached for the sky like a scar carved into the horizon. At night, it glowed with the same faint silver light that once bled from Seretha's wound. Pilgrims came from across worlds to see it, not to worship, but to remember the fallen, the defiant, the ones who learned that even divinity could bleed. They called it the Whispering Stone, because when the wind passed through its hollow core, it sang. Some said it was the voice of the gods, begging forgiveness. Others said it was the voice of Sereth, whispering freedom into the dark. I never told them which was true. Maybe it was both. I had grown old by then, though time had treated me kindly. The light within my chest still glowed faintly, a reminder that her fire had never left. I lived among settlers who had never seen war, teaching them what it meant to build rather than conquer, to listen instead of command. They would ask about the scar on my chest, and I'd tell them it was the first thing the universe ever gave me that didn't fade. I stopped telling them about her after a while. Not because I forgot, but because I realized she had never really left this world. Her name had become part of the wind, her story fused into the rhythm of creation. Wherever people stood defiant before the impossible, she was there. Wherever someone looked at a wound and saw meaning instead of pain, she lived again. But sometimes, when the stars burned low and the settlement slept, I would walk alone to the edge of the crystal field, the cool wind tugging at my coat, and look up. The stars were changing, new constellations forming from the wreckage of old myths. Among them, I could always find one shape, a curve of 7 bright lights forming the outline of a blade, with a faint flicker just above it like a heartbeat. That one I knew was her. The night I first saw it, the hum in my chest grew stronger, And for the first time in decades, I heard her voice again. Not through the air, not through memory, but through the quiet pulse of light. You kept your promise, she whispered. I tried, I said aloud. You did more than try, she answered. You remembered. Her voice was softer now, woven into the stars themselves. You taught them that faith and freedom are the same scar. I smiled faintly. I couldn't have done it without you. You did it because of me, she corrected. But the difference matters less than you think. I wanted to ask her if she was at peace, if the seraphim were truly gone, but I already knew her answer. Peace was not her nature. She was the echo of struggle made eternal, the embodiment of every choice that said, I will not kneel. As the years drifted on, the new generation began to forget. The old words faded. The monuments turned to relics of a past they couldn't imagine. But forgetting isn't the same as erasure. Somewhere deep in the pulse of every living thing, her defiance remained. And so did mine. When the day came that I could no longer rise from my bed, I felt no fear. My hands had grown thin, my breath shallow, but the glow within me had never dimmed. Pulsed steady, like a heartbeat older than flesh. I knew what it meant. It was time. I asked them to carry me outside, to the whispering stone. The suns were setting, their light washing the world in gold and silver. I lay there beneath the monument, the air warm, the wind singing softly through the hollow spiral. The young ones gathered, their faces solemn, though they didn't yet understand what they were witnessing. I told them a story, not of war, but of light, of how a wound can become a bridge, how pain can become meaning. I told them about Sereth, the warrior who fought gods not to win, but to teach the universe how to remember. And when my voice grew too weak, I looked up one last time at the stars. The blade of light was there, as always, shining steady. Still watching, I whispered. Always came the reply, soft as breath. I closed my eyes then, and the warmth inside me spread, dissolving every ache, every scar, every fear. The light left my chest and rose into the air, swirling upward like dust caught in sunlight. The last thing I saw was the children's faces bathed in silver radiance, their eyes wide, their mouths open in awe. The wind shifted, and the whispering stone sang louder than it ever had before. For a heartbeat, the entire valley glowed. Then it faded, leaving behind silence and peace. In the days that followed, they said the monument changed. Where once it had been cold stone, now faint lines of light ran through it like veins, pulsing in rhythm with the wind. The elders called it the second scar. No one touched it, but when people stood close enough, they said they could feel warmth blooming beneath their palms, a steady heartbeat echoing through the stone. They didn't know whose it was. Maybe mine, maybe hers, maybe both. Centuries passed, and empires rose and fell again, as they always do. But every 1,000 years, when the twin suns aligned perfectly over Vera's spine, the monument's light would flare once more, and the wind would whisper the same story. A story of an alien warrior who turned her wound into a weapon, of a human who touched that wound and found the courage to share it, and of how together they proved that scars are not endings, but beginnings written in the language of survival. The stars still remember her shape, her defiance, her grace, and somewhere beyond time, beyond gods and wars, she still walks across the fields of light with that same quiet smile, knowing that the universe finally learned the meaning of her scar.